Hey, welcome to another Fun Court Media Camera Gear thing. I'm Jason, and today I have the Velo Shutterboss 2 camera remote control. Now what this is a remote control you plug into your camera, and then you can fire the shutter manually, or you can use, this one has timer functions. So it has a self timer, it has a long exposure timer, and it has a time-lapse timer. And you can combine all three of those functions together to do a long exposure time-lapse selfie. Anyway, I'm going to open this up and take a look at it and see how it works together. Okay, there's not a whole lot in the box. There's the box, the instructions, batteries that I've already installed, and the remote control. Now, what I've seen is there's about 5 different models of this at least. All of them have the same remote control, but then they change out the connector based on what kind of camera it needs to connect to. So I have the Sub Mini, the 2.5 millimeter plug that works with my Canon and my Fuji that I'm currently filming with. Finally peel off the plastic. Woo! That was not a very good peel. Let me connect it to my camera. We'll take a look at some of the features. So it does run on 2 AAA batteries.
The instructions say the battery life is as follows. Powered by 2 AAA batteries, it can take approximately 2 months of continuous shots with a delay of 5 minutes between exposures and an exposure length of 4 minutes 56 seconds, which I translate to mean a long battery life.
So if we come here, and you always want to make sure it's off when you're going to plug in a remote control into your camera. So I'm using my Canon 70D. You can see right there is just a little remote control port. So plug it into there. So the first thing to note is we can actually control the shutter without even turning on the device. So it has a mechanical shutter down here, and so it does support autofocus. So if we hold down halfway, it's going to do just like you would holding down a shutter halfway. You can see it focusing there, and push all the way and it'll take the exposure. It also has, if you set your camera to bulb mode, and as long as we hold it, it will take the exposure. And you can also take longer exposures, so if you're doing like night photography, you can push in and slide up, and it's going to lock it, and it's going to keep running your bulb. And when you're done, just slide it down.
The shutter button also works without any batteries in it, which is a nice touch.
So let's go ahead and turn it on now. We need to push the power button for about 3 seconds. It's also the timer start-stop button. Okay, so it turned on. Now let's quickly go over the interface here. You have a backlight / lock button. So if we push that, it's going to, one time, it's going to turn the backlight on. You probably can't see it right now because we're out in the middle of the sunlight. But tap that and the backlight's going to stay on for 6 seconds. If you push and hold it, it's going to lock it with a L, and so then anything we do, it won't do anything, so we have to push and hold the lock again to unlock it. You have your set, which gets you into the menu of setting everything, and the arrow keys to navigate around once you're setting stuff. And then you have the timer start-stop button, so if we push that, it's going to start doing whatever we have programmed into the menu. And then, like I said, to turn it off, you push and hold this again for 3 seconds. That's going to turn it off. It does have an indicator light as well as a beeping. So now that it's turned on, let's try that long exposure again. If we do that, it's going to start counting up. You can hear it actually beep every second. And yes, you can turn off the beep. I have it on just so you can hear all the times that it will beep. So up here we can see we have the self timer, the long exposure timer, the interval timer, and the number of shots to take, as well as controlling that beep. So to get in here and start changing things, we can push the set button, and hopefully you can see that black bar is underneath the self. So that means we're changing the self timer. So this would be if you wanted to set a self timer and run in front of the camera, obviously, or if you were doing a long exposure and didn't want to touch the camera, and maybe even jiggling the cable, you're doing something so sensitive, you had your macro shot set up or something, that even touching this, you're afraid it's going to throw your focus off on your camera. So you can set a self timer. If we come here and just set it to 2 seconds. To go ahead and start doing any of your timer functions then, so we have just the self timer right here, so we just hit that start stop button one time. And it went ahead and took the picture. To clear anything you have in here, you just push the lock and the power button at the same time, just real fast, and it's going to clear everything. It will clear every single setting, so keep that in mind. There's no way to just clear individual, like self, long. No, you're clearing everything out. You also cannot set multiple programs, so you can't have like a nightscape one and an indoor one. It's one or nothing. So you can set hours, minutes, and seconds, and you're limited to 1 second under 100 hours on all of these menus. So try to keep things below that. If we come over here to long exposure and do the same thing, we can say that, okay, we want our long exposure to be for 6 seconds. And so in order to do a long exposure, obviously you have to have your camera in bulb mode. And if we start that, it's going to count down. It's taking the shot immediately. So finish that shot. Okay, so I've taken it off of bulb mode so that I can show you the interval mode. So I've cleared out my long exposure, and we'll just come over to interval and come in here and make some adjustments. So I want one every 5 seconds. This will only take one shot, so I need to come over to number and tell it how many shots I want to take. So let's do 5. So we're all ready to go. So if I just hit the timer start stop. And it counts down from 3, 2, 1 is when the beeps come. So you could have like a 20-second timer, it only beep on the last 3 seconds. And any time it's going, you can stop it just by pushing the timer start stop, even in the middle of a run.
The number of interval shots is limited to 399, or it can be set to infinity by selecting the -- option.
Now, let's say you want to combine the two, so you want to do a long exposure and an interval. So we can come back over here to long exposure, and let's do a 1 second exposure. Now, one thing to note is that the interval does not take into account the long exposure timer. So if you set a 5 second interval and do a 1 second exposure, there's only going to be 4 seconds in between shots because both timers run concurrently. So if you had a 3 second long exposure and you wanted a 10 second interval in between shots, then you would need to set your interval timer to 13 seconds because it would run those 3 seconds while the shot is happening and then continue to count down the rest of the 10-second timer that was left. So I've got 1 second. Well, just for fun, let's make it 2 seconds to show it off a little bit more. And we'll bring this up to 6 seconds. And we'll go ahead and I do need to move this back into bulb mode. Otherwise it won't do the long exposure. Here we go. So that was 1 second. 1001-ish. So, pretty self-explanatory. And you can combine all three, actually. So if you want to do a self-timer, so you can come here and do, 4 seconds. So self-timer only runs before the first shot. And then after that, it goes into the intervals that you have set. So if I do 4 seconds and hit start, it's going to count down those 4 seconds. It's going to take the first shot, and then it's going to be running into the interval. And you can see the countdown of how many shots are left. And yeah, so the light does light up while it's taking that exposure. One more thing to note using the interval timer is if you're using a flash, you need to take into account how long your flash is going to take to recharge. So if your flash takes 4 seconds to recharge, if your interval is set to 3 seconds, your flash isn't going to be firing with every shot. So you need to add that time in as well.
Something else to keep in mind when you're using the interval timer is that if your camera is set to automatic focus, but it takes longer to find the focus than there is time between shots, it won't take the next photo.
And that final menu is just that beep. So if we push set, we can come in and turn it off.
One final trick this has is you can trigger the shutter manually in the middle of a timer. So if you had a 15-second timer going and something interesting came in your shot that you want to make sure you got perfectly in frame, you can press the trigger button to capture it, and your timer will continue running as normal without interruption.
So why use this if your camera, say like my Fuji X-T3 here, if your camera has an internal interval timer, it can do everything I just showed you all by itself. Well, one reason is the fact that sometimes this is in an inconvenient spot, like if I'm doing astrophotography on a star tracker, the camera might be hanging upside down, and that's kind of awkward to reach down there and check your settings, things like that. Also, it's just handy to have it all in one spot instead of having to navigate menus on your camera and work with that. You just set this all up. Plus, it remembers, as long as you don't turn it off, it'll remember your settings. And before I realized you could turn this off, I thought the LCD was on all the time. Before I realized you could push and hold the button to turn it off, I left this on for about a week straight, and it remembered my settings the whole time. So you can do that as well. Another nice feature is the fact that this shutter button works all the time. It's mechanical, but then electrical. It's physically connected to the camera. My phone can connect to my Fuji, and it does have the same functionality where I can control the shutter remotely via Bluetooth, and I can lock the shutter to keep it open as long as I want. But it only works about 75% of the time. The Fuji app is pretty dang good as far as camera apps go compared to the Canon and Sony, but the 25% of the time that doesn't work, it's a pain in the butt because then I have to spend about 2 minutes restarting everything, turning the app off, turning Wi-Fi off, turning the camera off. And so just knowing you have physical control over the shutter is a time saver and increases your reliability when timing is really important. But anyway, that's going to do it for this quick video. If you want to pick up your own Shutterboss, I will have this one linked in the video description down below. And once you're there, you can browse and find the other ones if you need a different connector for like a Nikon or Olympus or something. Just for the record, this one is the Canon sub-mini connector, but like I said, it's any camera that can use a sub-mini connector this will work with, including my Fuji. If you appreciated this video, please give it a thumbs up. It helps other people find the video when they're trying to find information about this. And then while you're at it, right next to it, click subscribe so you don't miss any of the future photography, tech tips, the videography stuff, the travel vlogs, or camping stuff that I do. I do a wide range of stuff. I'm really close to hitting that 1,000 subscribers mark, so if you can help me get that, I will be very grateful. But until next time, I'm doing what I love. Keep doing what you love. Thanks for watching.